All right, a new educational chess game, and my opponent starts with d4. I'm going to play knight to f6. I'm controlling the central square e4 with my knight. He plays knight to f3, so I'm going to play d5. For now, it's symmetrical. Nothing crazy yet. Let's see how he continues. He plays g3. So how am I going to play? This position, I always have a bit of trouble with this position because he's going to play in the spirit of a Catalan, for those who know it. It's about playing bishop to g2, kingside castling, and later playing c4. The pressure on d5 to open the diagonal for the white square bishop. That's not easy to play against. White are playing a very positional game, and that bothers me. All right, I'm going to bring out my bishop to f5. I'm going to try to play in a classical way. e6, c6 to try to consolidate my position. Or maybe c5 if he gives me the chance to play it. But there it is, he plays c4. That's what I was afraid of, you see. With c4, I won't take since my pawn would be weak. Plus, he'd have queen to a4 check, which opens the diagonal. I feel more like playing c6. But I'm also going to look at bishop takes knight. Why? Because after rook takes, I have bishop b4 check. But after bishop b4 check, he doesn't have to put his bishop there, because the idea is to break up his pair of bishops afterwards. But actually, he could play knight to d2, so I'll just play c6. After all, the position looks solid for black. But this kind of position has often gone badly for me, this type of position. So he plays knight c3, and here, what to play? Knight d7, bishop e7, bishop d6, bishop b4. There are a lot of possibilities. It's hard to know which is best. Well, I'll play bishop d6, or maybe even h6, actually. To prevent on knights h4 that they can take my bishop, I could retreat. Although if I play knight h4, I still have bishop g4. So I'll play bishop d6 for now. If he pushes c5, it's not a problem. I'll retreat to c7. He increases the pressure on the pawn d5, and then I could play knight d7 and e5. He plays queen b3. He's attacking b7. So now can I play queen b6? There's no fork because I'll take the queen. So queen b6, if he plays c5, I can take his queen. He takes a step back. My oven? Why not? Come on. I would like to propose that we swap queens right now. He plays c5, so I exchange the queens. Bishop c7. His pawns are doubled but fixable. He can play b4 or b5, but I can't play a6 since he'll play b5 anyway. I couldn't take because of the rook. So I play knight d7. My goal is to support the push to e5. I know he's going to support b5, but I'm going to support e5. And if I manage to do kingside castling and have the rooks connected, I could play a 6, but it's too late, and play b5. So what is he going to want to do? He's attacking b6. Since my rook's unprotected, I'll castle kingside. I take on b6, but he'll likely take c6. Exchange. He created a weakness on the a file, but he'll have a weakness on the b file. And I have the bishop controlling the square b1, which could be interesting. So taking for me isn't interesting because he takes back and attacks me. Here, I'm interested in the push to e5. Pawn takes, knight takes, knight takes, bishop takes. That's not bad. Note that after the push to e5, if the pawn is no longer there, sometimes it's the pawn on c5 that can be taken. On the push to e5, if he plays knight h4, bishop g4. All right, let's send the pawn to e5. So to the b5 lever, I respond with the e5 lever. And he plays e3. If I take on d4, he might recapture with the knight, maybe to attack my bishop, but be careful because the pawn on c5 will remain a lasting weakness. But the knight on d4 will attack the pawn on c6 twice, so it's not a good idea to take here on d4. If I push to e4, the knight goes away, but I close the game and it's not clear how I'll develop after that. Here I'm considering rook e8. Rook to e8 has the advantage of freeing up the square and path for the knight to come help put pressure on d4. And sometimes bishop g4 to eliminate the defending knight. So I'm going to play rook e8. And besides, the rook is placed on a file that could open up, so why not? I didn't even notice there were ideas like bishop d3. I'm attacking the rook and the pawn on b5. How did I not see this bishop move? d3, you must have mentioned it. Mark, there's bishop d3. Yes, bishop d3, it attacks the rook. The rook comes to d1. Afterwards, we can take on b5, knight takes, pawn takes. Bishop d3 is still possible. I'm going to look at it because it's not certain that it's a good idea. We have to check. Bishop d3, rook b1, bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes. I win a pawn now. The pawn on c6 is gone. The pawns are doubled. The pawn on d5 is weakened along the diagonal. I have to be careful. Am I really winning? By the way, this pawn I need to calculate. Bishop d3, rook b1. Bishop b5, knight takes, pawn takes. Pawn takes, knight takes, knight takes. And here he attacks d5 twice with the bishop and the rook. And if I take back with my rook to defend d5, bishop b2, he attacks my rook. And d5 is very weak. So I think it's not even a good idea to play. Bishop d3 here. We'll look at the analysis. I often suggest an analysis to try to understand what I should have played. But you see, I'm very cautious. Bishop d3, rook d1. Bishop takes b5, knight takes, pawn takes. And all of a sudden, d5 is no longer protected. Now the rook is facing this pawn and the bishop as well. So he takes on d4. Knight takes, knight takes. Maybe I can take back with the bishop to attack his rook. But he moves it, and I still have a problem on d5 anyway. Let's imagine that he moved to 2. How I defend the 5 with that rook there. What bothers me is that it's a rather defensive attitude. I gain a pawn, but I find myself having to defend. What other ideas do I have? I still have the idea of knight f8 to capture on d4 and return to e6 to attack that pawn. Good. Shall we play? Knight f8. The d7 knight doesn't give me much, so I prefer to play knight on f8 and return to e6. And look at what he's playing too. So he takes it, I take it. And he plays bishop d2. He might double the rooks to attack the pawn on a7. If I attack the pawn on b, the knight moves and the bishop will defend the pawn on b. So here, I'm looking at bishop g4 to weaken the defense of d4. Threaten, bishop takes, pawn takes, pawn takes. Knight e6 to attack. And what if I played knight e4? Why this move? To exchange my knight, which does not bring me much, for his knight, which can support the b5 push and put pressure on d5. Knight e4 is taken, bishop takes back. And he could have used his knight to support the b5 push. Let's play like this. We'll play knight e4. So the knight on f8 is still meant to come back to e6 to attack the pawn on d4 at some point. But I wouldn't be unhappy to get rid of it, of this knight on c3. He plays rook to c1. So I also have to consider what happens if I take his dark square bishop, because I get my pair of bishops, I win. The only dark square bishop. Pawn takes, pawn takes. Knight e6, I attack d4, and he comes back to f3 to defend. But bishop g4, I attack again. That could be interesting too. I could take, but if I take on d4, he recaptures with the knight, attacking c6. So I'm going to take his bishop on a dark square. I'm changing my strategy. I'm taking his pawn on d4. And now looking at the board, I'm really quite tempted to play my knight to the e6 square. However, I expect he's going to come right back to f3 with his piece. And bishop to g4. And what if I started with rook, b8? Rook to b8, I attack b4, and he can't play rook b1 because of the light squared bishop. But rook b8, he's going to play b5. If I take, he's going to take me on d5 with the rook behind. So first I'm going to go knight to 6 to attack d4 and try to bring a knight to f3 to block his light squared bishop. Maybe he could have even played b5 to try to hit d5. But he came back to f3 with his knight. And here I'm looking at rook b8, but he'll take on a 7. So the other rook to b8, I'm attacking b4. But I'm leaving my rook on a8 in the sights of his bishop. Sometimes there can be sacrifices. Then with rook b8, I can also try to play a5. So I play rook b8. I'm attacking b4. He can't play rook b1 because of the light square bishop. That's the good news. And so he's putting pressure on a 7, but I'm putting pressure on b4 and d4. c6. He hasn't managed to put pressure on me yet, but now he sends the pawn to b5. And besides, I had talked about this idea, if I take, I lose. d5, actually. But is it really that bad? If I take and he takes d5, then it will be bad for his bishop on the light square, though. He has two connected passed pawns, and so do I, but his light square bishop is bothering me. He's attacking my dark square bishop. Maybe bishop to e4, I attack his knight, knight takes, knight takes. And I'll play with my own pawn, why not? All right, let's go. Capture on b5. I'm really, really scared in this position. And on top of that, I do not have much time left. So now, plus he is threatening to take my bishop with his 7th pawn. So I play bishop there. I give him the dark square bishop, but then I try to set up a blockade on the white squares to slow down the advance of his pawns and also send my own pawns on the attack. If his knight moves, I immediately take his light square bishop. And you see, the idea is to create a blockade. Even if I play c6, the pawn is blocked by the knight. I'm trying to block these two connected passed pawns and send my own two. So he might play rook 1, take control of the file, and attack my bishop. On bishop d5, maybe come in on e5. That's what he does. I'm going to play f5 to protect. I'm willing to exchange my bishop on the white square, but only against his, actually, because otherwise I have a problem with the rook on a8. So here I exchange. And now, does he have a threat with his knight? Yes, he has threats anyway, but I can't block everything. I'm really tempted to play b4 to advance. If I play king d6, he attacks my rook and he attacks my pawn, actually. He'll also be looking for checks here. Maybe I need to counter his knight. I don't have much time left. Maybe I need to counter his knight. On king 6, he attacks the pawn again. So I'm going to play rook e8. On k6, I can also exchange the rooks and push a5, protected by my rook. Or push the pawn b. He plays king d6, I exchange. I push the pawn a for now. If he comes to e7, king d5, I counterattack, he gives check. He's going after the pawn on f5. If I play king f7, he takes on f5, he'll threaten everything. e7, by the way. Maybe I'll come to f8 then. I'll come to f8. And I push the pawn a. I'm down one pawn. But well, he came to take the pawn. It's not the most important pawn, and it still allowed me to advance 2 moves with my pawn a. Here, it's the speed of the connected passed pawns that will manage to make the most of the connected passed pawns. The fact that he has the pawn f as well isn't very important. I think in this endgame, but it's a game without increment. I always get caught by that. I'm so used to playing with increment that I always get caught out. I could have played right away the pawn a, but I preferred to support it with the pawn b. Now I'll have to play at full speed. Come on, let's keep going. He's coming to block. If I advance, he takes, so I advance here. Now I need to bring my knight, or with check, actually, if he lets me give check. No, he doesn't let me. In the end, my passed pawns have advanced well in the position. So I am actually going to make the queen now, and then he will take it back. I'm going to attack his knight, but he won't want to move it. Okay, I'm going to attack again and I'll advance. Then he'll take it. He might come to d2. I'm still going to bring my king so I don't have any trouble with his pawns. Oh, wow, this is a disaster to lose so much time like this. Well, there was king e7 there. So here, in this position, obviously, if I play king e7, I win because he can't make a queen. So you can see the computer gives me 92% versus 87% for my opponent. So let's take a look, because in the opening I played badly. And it's not the first time I've played poorly against this system that my opponent sets up. So I need to understand. d4, knight f6, knight f3, d5, and g3. There you go. I really struggle against these systems. It's a bit like the Catalan with the idea of putting the bishop on g2 on the long white diagonal and playing c4. Because in the end, he's going to attack the center. I'll be under pressure on d5. And if there's an exchange, he has a central majority of pawns. And there's the bishop on the long diagonal. It's really annoying, actually. I don't see the play for black. It's very complicated. So I played bishop f5. I saw that some grandmasters play c5. But there are also grandmasters who play bishop f5. So it's possible to play it. Bishop g2, e6, c4, c6, knight c3, bishop d6, queen b3. Almost all the grandmasters who have faced this position didn't play queen b6, they played queen c8. They defended the pawn on b7 via the c8 square. But queen b6 is not losing yet, because even the computer, I think it even evaluates queen b6 as better than queen c8. So c5, qb3, pawn takes, and that's where my real mistake was. But honestly, I couldn't have known that, because this position has been played 15 times in theory. That is to say, I have a database of several million games. You might know ChessBase. And in this database, this position is referenced 15 times. And it turns out that 14 out of 15 players played my move, bishop to c7, and only one player played bishop to e7. And actually, the correct move is bishop to e7. But at first, I didn't understand why. It seemed so natural to me to put the bishop on c7 to prepare after knight d7, the push to e5. But we'll see that it was bishop to e7 that needed to be played. Let me show you why. For example, after bishop to e7, if my opponent develops, like in the game with b4, kingside castling, for example, a 6 to try to prevent b5, but that does not stop it, he can still play b5. Because after the capture, knight takes, and I can't take back because of the pin. But the difference with bishop c7 is that my bishop on e7 is not attacked. And so I can get into this position where the knight comes to b5 without attacking my bishop, and as a result I can play knight c6. Attack the pawn on d4, have this square for the knight, connect my rooks. The white knight is now threatened, so it can retreat. And here knight d7 to maybe prepare the e5 push, to put the bishop on f6, attack d4. Sometimes you can also have the b6 push. And the computer gives equality in this position. But me, as you saw, I played bishop c7, and so there was b4, and I'm going to have problems with this bishop in the end. Knight d7, b5, kingside castling. I play e5, he plays e3, and here we talked about the move bishop d3. We had discussed it. So it's true that bishop d3 doesn't actually allow me to win a pawn, because he's going to play rook d1, bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes, but he can take on e5 in Librant le Rook. For example, knight takes, bishop takes, and he also frees the bishop. That being said, it's an equal position. Bishop takes, knight takes, rook takes. I retreat the bishop to f6, and the computer gives an equal position once again. So I could have gone for this move, fd3. But since I told myself I wasn't really winning this pawn, I played rook e8. He plays b4, knight f8 to reposition the knight to e6. There, he takes on c6. He plays fd2. I play knight e4. And here he misses the best move in the position, but it's not an easy one. With white, he should have played rook a6. But rook a6 isn't an easy concept because there may be captures of the bishop or the knight, and then afterwards bishop d3, which will attack the two rooks. But actually, rook a6, it's fine. Because if I take, for example, his knight and he takes back bishop d3, I still have a problem with this bishop. Rook takes c6. Clearly, the bishop positioning that seems so natural to me, I suffer from it in every tactical phase. But he didn't play rook a6. He played rook c1, but I took on d2. I took on d4, that was the best line. Knight e6 to attack the pawn, knight f3, and there, I don't know what got into me. Maybe it was the lack of time. I should have played a 6 to prevent b5. I played rook b8 to attack b4, telling myself he couldn't play rook b1, but I forgot he could play b5. And actually, in some lines, I mentioned this move b5 to you, which weakens d5, and so he plays it. And once again, I have the problem with the bishop on the dark square that's under attack. The knight defends, but it's still a problem. Bishop to e4, knight takes. King takes, rook to e1, f5, king to e5. So here I exchange, I play rook to e8. He goes into c6, I exchange on e1, a 5. And here he makes the mistake. He plays knight e7 check. He shouldn't go after the pawn. The computer suggests rook e5 with white, but it's not even to go and get the pawn on f5. It's to support the push of e5. Because in this position, the problem is that I am currently activating my passed pawns. And he needs to activate his own, so he absolutely has to play rook e5, but he will play knight e7 chess. So I come to f8, he takes on f5, and I send the pawn from a4, and now the position has become winning for me. You saw it in the game. He tries to come back with his knight, but he is almost behind, and in the position it has become totally winning. There was b4, my knight needs to come to c2, so knight d5. I still have a bit of a smile, unfortunately, because it's the frustration of having lost. A somewhat forced smile, the frustration of having lost, when now it's totally winning, of course, because he'll even have to give up the knight. So I'm going to speed up the position, rook a4, knight b2, rook a2, knight c4, b2. There, he plays kd2. He's trying to make me lose more time because he saw I only had a few seconds left on the clock. King e4, I make the queen, he takes. King d5, rook d1 check, king c6, knight check, king c7. Rook d4, c6, rook d5, d7 check, but here king is 7. And of course, if he makes a queen, I take his queen. So it's totally lost. He's going to end up losing his pawns no matter what. I can even sacrifice the knight here for the pawn, then take his d7 pawn. And my rook will be able to take all his other pawns on the other side. A painful loss because I lose like this in a winning position. But on the other hand, did I really deserve this game? Because in the opening, honestly, I was in a really bad spot. The opening, the middle game, I played very sluggishly and he always actually had a better position. But now I understand that in this type of position, when c5 happens, it's better to go to e7. And by the way, even if we go back a few moves earlier, most players don't play bishop d6, they play bishop e7. So as not to even give white the time to play d6 and attack the bishop. But you see, I thought that with the bishop on d6, it wasn't so good for him to play c5. Because I thought I had bishop c7, the pressure on d5 was reduced because he had a pawn on c4, and then I could play queen to d7 and e5 and free up my game that way. I actually didn't realize that it would really be a problem. My bishop. Well, I would have made progress in this game, even though I admit it's always a position that gives me trouble with black. This opening is probably the one where I've lost the most games. Well, you can leave me likes, comments, share the video. Well, maybe don't share this one too much. Actually, this one. And we'll meet again soon for new adventures on the chessboard. Goodbye, everyone.